All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited to have my good friend, neighbor, could I call you my attorney? You're my attorney. I'm a client of your firm.
Absolutely.
And my wife's friend, Ben Gottlieb. Ben, super excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So tell us, just for people who don't know you, like a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So about 6 years ago, my partner and I branched off. We started up our own real estate law firm.
Yeah.
Pretty much do everything under the umbrella with respect to real estate related issues. So that can span from easement cases, buyer-seller disputes, non-disclosure cases, commercial landlord-tenant disputes, breach of contract actions, zoning issues, commercial litigation. All of that we handle. We usually tell people if it touches real estate, there's a very good chance our firm has handled it and can handle it. And then, of course, we also have a transactional practice as well.
Okay, nice. And how long have you been in law?
Been in law for, I think, going on 13 years now.
Okay, nice,
So, yeah.
nice. Now, that's not all you do. You are an excellent golfer as well, and that's how you and I connected. I remember meeting you. Our kids were playing baseball together. So I meet Ben at one of our kids' baseball games, and my wife, Danielle, had known your wife, Jackie, in advance, and she's like, yeah, Jackie says that Ben's really into golf. You know, I think you guys should hit it off. I'm like, cool, let me go talk to this guy. So you and I start talking, and it took about two minutes flat for us to get into golf, and we were off to the races from there.
Forgot to watch our kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, that fateful meeting led us to joining Superstition Mountain Golf Club. So you and I have been members there for about a year. What do you like most about being a member over there?
Yeah, it was an incredible opportunity last year. Obviously, they were looking for members, and we took advantage of that opportunity. I love several things. Obviously, two unbelievable golf courses with Superstition Mountain as the backdrop. Really, really nice members. But most importantly, and this is probably the most fitting, is the real estate along that golf course just is incredible. I love the architecture. I love the diversity. No two houses are the same.
Yeah.
Nothing like cookie cutter. I mean, you have one house on, hole number 2 of Lost Gold that, has panoramic windows across the entirety of the house. And then the next house is all stone. And so it's an incredible diversity, but then it also looks so incredible together, the aesthetics.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing, but the real estate, and the quality of the real estate is something that really attracted me. Not that I own a house on the course, but maybe one day that'd be a dream.
Yeah. I know. I'm surprised by that. How many nice houses are out there? There's there's 36 holes there, littered with high-end custom homes, and there's a ton of them going up. I was playing golf on Sunday. There's got to be, at least 6, 8, 10 high-end construction custom homes under construction right now on Superstition. So it's crazy. Yeah, that's an awesome place.
Yeah, I know a pretty good lender if any of them need one.
Yeah, I know a guy too. Yeah, I wonder if we know the same guy. Well, yeah, it's been a lot of fun to be at Superstition playing some money games. You and I have gotten into a group with some guys who like to play for some good dough, and I didn't really do a lot of that before we joined at Superstition. Now I like to take some of our friends' money on the golf course. That feels pretty good.
Yeah, it's also a great way to extend your retirement age.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I figure more I can make on the golf course, less I have to be in my office. Right? Those two work together. That's cool. What do you like most about those golf courses?
First and foremost, just the pristine condition that they keep it in.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely incredible. The greens out there are incredible. Also, there's a lot of snowbirds out there, and I'm obviously someone who stays in Phoenix during the summers. So
yeah,
it really feels like you own the place in the summer. I mean, it's just a ghost town. Nobody's there. 36 holes whenever you want it. So it's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah. Yeah, both those courses are super nice, amazing condition. I think the condition of those courses we're in this winter, you literally cannot get a golf course in better condition than unless it's like Augusta National. I mean, it's just like perfect. You know, I went and played up at Desert Mountain like a month ago or 6 weeks ago, and Desert Mountain's in great condition. Nothing wrong with it. You know, but it wasn't as pristine as Superstition Mountain has been. So that's pretty cool to have access to that. Yeah. Thinking in terms of golf, what do you think about Tiger's performance last week at the Masters?
Yeah, you can't say enough about it. I don't think people realize the extent of that accomplishment. I think a lot of people out there might be like, he didn't play well the weekend. He shot, a couple 78s. He came in 47th. Take the car accident out of the picture. Just to have your last tournament be 2020, take that many months off, and then go into the Masters, and you're 5 shots off the lead after 36 holes. There's just no words for that. I mean, I think he's going to build on it. I'm optimistic, maybe more than most about him. But I think he's going to build on it. Obviously, he does have some challenges with his body.
Yeah.
But I think his mind is his greatest asset. So I could definitely see him winning again on tour.
Yeah. That was well said, actually, because, even not taking into consideration like his physical issues, he hadn't played golf on the professional level for over 500 days, and he only really been able to seriously practice for a few weeks, and then he goes into the Masters, and he's still beating some of the best players in the world, and he's 46. Is he 46? I mean, that guy is a beast. It's ridiculous. One of the things he said, it was like a month ago, or maybe a little bit more, and I actually think it was Joe LaCava, his caddy, said that, they've been thinking about, is he really going to seriously be able to make a run at playing professional golf again? And the consideration was, am I able to put in the work necessary to climb Mount Everest? And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, is it's not just getting out to play golf. You have to put in so much work to be at that level. And Tiger's the ultimate grinder, so it's amazing to just think of the commitment that he has to getting to that level.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and obviously, if anybody can do it, it's him. He has Ben Hogan as his case precedent.
Yeah,
someone who got in a car wreck, 60, 70 years ago, and came back to win professional tournaments. So I think that's kind of his focus, and it would not surprise me if he went on to win another major and more tournaments.
Yeah. I remember in 09, or I think it was 09, when his ex-wife Elin took the golf club to him at his house. Remember, over Thanksgiving? And I remember we were playing. We had a tee time that weekend at not Johnson Ranch, one of the courses in Maricopa, not Southern Dunes, but the other one that's down there. And so we're sitting in the club. The Duke. Thank you. Yeah. So we're sitting in the clubhouse of the Duke. There was a frost delay. And I made a bet with a buddy of mine that Tiger would win another major, and he's like, no, he's done. And that went on for 11 years, or for, what was that, 9 years it took him to win another major. I will never bet against Tiger Woods until he has said he's done. I feel like he could win a tournament at any time. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I think he had the highest level of betting activity after his pre-Masters interview, where they asked him, do you think you can win? And without even blinking, he just looked the examiner in the eye and said, I do. and right after that, the betting activity just went nuts, because everybody learned their lesson in 2019. Don't bet against Tiger.
Yeah. Yes. What's your favorite Tiger moment, thinking about watching Tiger over the years?
Probably the shot on 16 in the 2005 Masters in the final round.
Yeah.
Just seeing the level of focus that he had, and he's sitting there, mouthing, silently to himself, and he's just so engrossed in the moment. I've never seen anything like that, and so it's pretty remarkable.
It's crazy. Yeah. That would be my favorite moment too. I think maybe my second favorite would be a couple of them. His 97 Masters win. Absolute domination of the entire field, hitting pitching wedge into the par fives, just shoots 40 on the front nine, and then goes on to win the tournament by a record number. I mean, that just tells you how strong that guy is mentally. He shoots 40 and then just destroys everybody from that point forward. You know, it's like nobody even knew what to do with that at that point. His dad's like, yeah, I knew he'd do that.
Yeah, he put an exclamation point on it.
Yeah.
He, as you would say, he was sending a message.
Yeah. We got to send a message on the golf course sometimes. Yeah, we send a message. You know, I'll drop a 79 on you on the golf course. That's my message. Oh, that's awesome.
But I can get you 3% mortgage rate.
Yeah. Not anymore. Those days are gone. So how, like, when you were thinking about going into law, what gravitated you toward real estate law?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. I took some property courses in law school. I really enjoyed those. Also, I went to Arizona State Law School and loved Phoenix. That's what brought me out here. Then I loved it even more from going to law school here. So I knew I would want to stay out here. And Arizona is a great climate for real estate. It's very hot, a lot of real estate investors, a lot of activity that goes on here. Leading up to the Great Recession, Arizona was one of the hottest real estate markets. We once again, in the pandemic, found ourselves being one of the hottest national real estate markets. So it's a great area where there's a lot going on with real estate, and there's also a lot of real estate issues here. You know, it's funny. Like, I'll talk to my dad sometimes, who lives in Michigan, and he'll be like, "Wait, you had a trial where there was a neighbor dispute, and one of the houses got flooded because the neighbor built a wall," and he's just kind of surprised at how many legal issues can crop up here in Arizona, but they do.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of HOAs, and then you have related issues with that, and you have all these different easement access issues that come up, and zoning issues.
Yeah.
And nuisance issues. You have issues over people wanting to use their property as short-term rentals, and other neighbors don't want that. And so the issues are just endless. We get so many calls every week, and it's always interesting to see what the issues of the day are, but they're plentiful.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I've been talking a lot to people about the short inventory situation that we've had in this market for a number of years, like 6-7 years now. And like one of the primary drivers of that is that builders can't build enough homes to keep pace with demand. And one of the things I've been like researching more is that one of the, builders have a labor issue. There's been a materials issue with COVID, but there's also like a land issue in the sense of being able to buy and then split parcels and reduce them down to get them to sizes where they can build affordable housing. Do you know a lot about that? And like, because like my understanding is the bureaucracy and the red tape involved around splitting parcels down and rezoning plots of land is difficult to navigate for a developer. Do you know much about that space?
Yeah, absolutely. We handle a lot of those cases. There's statutes governing subdividing lots and lot splits, and you have to go through the county and the local town administrator and get approval. And oftentimes, legal issues arise from that as well. So like, for example, we had a big case go to trial recently and then an appeal because there was a lot split that was signed off on, and there was access that was depicted on the lot split showing that, hey, we're splitting the lots, but don't worry, they both have ingress, egress access. But the legal description didn't match the access route that was depicted on the lot split. So it became this huge dispute because it was like, hey, there's no access. And this lot split, even though it was recorded with the local recorder's office, should be declared invalid. And so there was this huge lawsuit over access, and it all resulted from a lot split gone wrong.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's interesting, man. Never a boring day in the real estate legal world. You would think it's dry, but it's anything but dry.
Yeah. It seems like you guys could get into a million different things.
It's exciting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's kind of like my business. My dad was in the mortgage business. That's how I got into mortgage lending. But I can remember in high school thinking like, I'll never do mortgage lending. That sounds like the most boring job I could think of, but it's actually not, because every client is different. Every situation is different. Everybody's financial profile is different. There's all kinds of things that come up on a transaction. So that like variety and challenge is what keeps you engaged.
And it must be great to always beat out the competition, get your clients the best rates.
Absolutely.
Give them the best product.
Yep.
And always kind of stay ahead of the curve in terms of education and knowledge as to what's best for your clients.
Yeah, that's where we really try to stay ahead, is like the knowledge, educational piece, helping our clients not only like buy a home, but build wealth. Because buying a home, getting into home ownership is one of the biggest wealth creators for the average person. So if they learn how to leverage that and make good decisions with that, that can set them up for retirement.
Well, and I would think the value of a loan officer goes up exponentially in a environment of rising rates versus lower rates, because in lower rates, everybody's refinancing, they're purchasing, and loan originators are dime a dozen. But in a rising rate environment, that's where you really need to lean on a knowledgeable loan originator to know what to do. Do I pay points? Should I refinance? Do I get an adjustable rate or an arm's loan? So I think in that environment, that's where the value of a lot of experience and knowledge can come into play for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, and I totally agree. Those are the things we're talking about. I need to get you on our team. I don't think I could afford you, but I want to. That sounded really good.
I'll lower my rate to $1,000 an hour for you. And you can just take a bag off me and go.
That's the neighbor discount. Oh, that's awesome. What does your firm look like? Like how many people do you have in the firm, and how's your team structured? That kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. We have about, I want to say, I don't know, upwards of 20 people now that comprise our firm. I think we have 10 lawyers. So we have 10 lawyers, 10 professionals. All the lawyers and professionals are just phenomenal. We really built up a great team. They're very hardworking. They're very skilled. We have lawyers that are winning oral arguments on summary judgment and trials, and taking a lot of depositions. And so we really have a great team that takes care of our clients. So yeah, very very fortunate to have started the company with Patrick. And to kind of see the development and evolution of where we're at just 6-7 years later.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you guys have built up an amazing firm. You told me you guys are like rated the #1 real estate law firm in the state, right?
Yeah, by Rankings Arizona.
Yeah,
I think this is the 4th or 5th year we got the #1 ranking. So it feels great to get that recognition from others, but. We don't really pay much attention to that. We just kind of keep our head down and try to get every client the best outcome we can, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, well, I reached out to your guys' firm a few years ago for a dispute that I had a great experience dealing with your office, and I got some really good guidance from your whole team, and you guys helped me with some documents, so that was an amazing experience working with your firm. So I can testify that what a great job you guys do.
Awesome.
Yeah. What if, because your business is kind of similar to mine in terms of like any attorney, CPA, financial advisor, mortgage, we're all kind of similar structure in terms of sales and operating as kind of self-employed. What have you done to grow your practice over the years? Like, what are some of the sales strategies you guys have had to generate clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are a big believer in education and communication. So staying abreast of current real estate laws, and then getting that information out to the public. So we like to write a lot, teach a lot. We'll teach classes to real estate agents and others. We write a lot of articles. We'll appear on TV when appropriate. During the pandemic, there were a lot of, as you will recall, executive orders, and a lot of them affected real estate. And so, eviction, for example, there were eviction executive orders that prevented landlords from evicting. And that was very, very stressful to a lot of people. And so we made sure we became very abreast of what all those executive orders were, and the analysis of, is this constitutional, and what to expect, and what might come ahead over the next 60 to 90 days. And then we did a really good job of hosting a lot of Zoom webinars, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and we still do a lot of webinars as well. But just getting that information out so people could use that information and be helped by it, and guided by it. And so, it's really a more holistic approach. It's an outward focus on just always trying to help people. And having a broader vision than just helping clients in the door, but also helping people become aware of recent real estate trends.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and that is like the focus for me in my business right now too, is education, building your brand through sharing your knowledge. I'm partnering with a guy who's now become a good friend, Dylan Burns, to help me with my social media and building a social brand. And I've done some other coaching around recruiting and building a business. And I feel like a lot of the people who are at the forefront of like building your own business or brand, that's what they're talking about, is adding value for people. And you add value for people by giving them knowledge, by teaching them things. It's your knowledge you hold that is valuable for others. So I think that's a great lesson for anybody who's trying to build any kind of practice, is to start putting all your knowledge out there and sharing it, because that's what people benefit from. And for me, like, I'm sharing all my sales strategies and what I'm doing with my business with loan officers in the industry, because it's not a threat to me. Like, if you have an abundance mentality, like, there's plenty of business out there for everybody to get. And the reality is not everybody will execute on the ideas, but when you're putting yourself out there and you're giving your best secrets and what you're working on and what then you're attracting people to you who want to learn that information as well. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's cool. And then, what about, like, with that kind of knowledge and stuff, is that like a combination of going out to existing and past clients, and then you're getting that information out to new prospective clients as well? Or what audience is that mostly targeted toward when you guys are doing all that educational?
Yeah, I'd say all of the above. I mean, if we're writing articles, we try to send it out to our contact database to appropriate people who could benefit from it.
Yeah.
And then, we teach continuing legal education credits to a lot of real estate agents, and we teach webinars at title agent offices.
Yeah.
And so, so really just getting that education out is kind of our key strategy.
Nice. And then would you say, like, in terms of referral sources, are real estate agents one of your biggest groups who refer you, or what other type of groups refer you?
Gosh, in terms of the biggest, over time, or at least where we're at right now, that's a hard question to answer, just because our reputation, has kind of evolved so much over the years. So we might get a case where somebody says, hey, I looked up an appellate case that you worked on and watched your oral argument on YouTube, and I have a similar issue. I like the way you argued that case. I could watch you argue it on YouTube, and I want to hire you.
Oh, wow.
Next day we could get a case where it's, from a real estate agent. Next day we could get it from a former client who has a different issue, or another referral source. So it's kind of day by day.
Yeah.
And then of course, there's people that'll just say, hey, I read one of your articles, or I saw you on TV and I have a similar issue. Can you help with this?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot of different buckets. And I think at this point it's hard to disentangle, which where does it come from most, or where is it going to come from tomorrow? So I just try to take it day by day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Then you guys have so much information out there, and your brand is in so many different spaces that you're getting business coming in from all different angles. That's why you guys are successful.
Trying.
Yeah,
trying.
That's awesome. Okay, great. What would you say for the average listener, or just really anybody? Like, what are some of the most important changes to Arizona state real estate law over the last couple of years?
Yeah, sure. Well, for starters, at the end of 2021, a new change came, a big change to the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act is basically a set of laws that are designed to protect debtors. And so prior to the end of last year, there was a long-standing homestead law that existed whereby you would be protected up to $150,000 in equity in your home. And so let's say a judgment creditor were to obtain a judgment against a judgment debtor in court, and then record that judgment with the local recorder's office. That act of recording the judgment would operate as a lien against all real property in the county. But there was an exception, and the exception was, well, wait a minute, if it's homestead property, which is essentially just somebody's personal residence, then it's not a lien. And now the judgment creditor has to jump through additional hoops to try to execute what's called a sheriff's sale. And even if the judgment creditor is able to do that, there's this $150,000 base protection that the judgment creditor can never access. So it's this debtor-friendly law that protects the judgment debtor and up to $150,000 in homestead equity. Well, that law was changed at the end of 2021. The two big changes were, one, the legislature added $100,000 to the protection. So now it's up to $250,000. But it's actually, on balance, probably a creditor-friendly change because in addition to that, it's now a lien. There's no longer an exception. So it now operates as a lien once the judgment's recorded against homestead property. And furthermore, the judgment creditor, under certain circumstances, has an opportunity to object to sales of real property. So the title officer has a statutory obligation to notify the creditor and say, hey, look, you have a judgment recorded against this property. There's a pending sale. Do you want to object? And the creditor has the power to object, and then the debtor has an opportunity to respond, and then the court rules. So it's really interesting. I think it's going to lead to a lot of delays in close of escrow because I just don't think the court system can move fast enough. You have to give the debtor an opportunity to file a response brief, and then the court has to set a hearing and make a ruling. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of delays in close of escrow. So it's really interesting. So that's one big change. Another one is just last week, actually, a new Arizona Supreme Court opinion came down. And the nuts and bolts of that opinion is that it's going to make it more difficult to amend the CC&Rs in an HOA community in Arizona moving forward. So what that court did is it struck various amendments in an HOA down in Tucson that followed the amendment procedures. And the court said, look, if the original covenants don't clearly provide notice that such an amendment could be affected, we're going to strike it if it's challenged in court. And that's what lower courts should do going forward. And so really interesting. I think it's going to have wide sweeping ramifications, in particular in the short-term rental space, because right now in the past few years, a lot of HOAs want to band together and get rid of short-term rentals. Yeah. And I think you're going to see a lot of investors lodge challenges in court and say, wait a minute, based on this new Arizona Supreme Court case, this amendment is invalid. And courts could ultimately agree. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
So what's the court's perspective on that? They're just like, why would they say that? Like, are they saying, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. They're just saying once that HOA CC&Rs are set up, they can't be changed unless what?
So I think from the court's perspective, they're saying, look, the CC&Rs are a creature of contract. So we're going to view this as a legal contract. And it would be unlawful to have someone move into an HOA and then later have the HOA, let's say it's 66, 2/3 band together and vote for an amendment that really is an unfair surprise to the homeowners that didn't vote for the amendment. And what they're saying is you have to provide some kind of notice in the original declaration that such an amendment could be effected. You can't just unreasonably alter the nature of the covenants. That wouldn't be fair to the other members. So I think the idea is, these CC&R provisions have an amendment protocol where you don't need uniform consent, right? You only need majority or 2/3 or let's say 75%. Okay. So I think what the court's saying is, out of fairness, if we're going to allow amendments where not all of the members are agreeing to these changes, in other words, if we're allowing, a majority of the members to impose changes on a minority that don't agree with that amendment, there better be something in the original declaration that the party that is proposing the amendment can point to where they might say, hey, look, it was reasonably foreseeable such an amendment could be affected. So if the original declaration, for example, regulated rentals and regulated the time frame in which rentals could be occupied, and then that time frame was tweaked or adjusted in an amendment, I think that would be upheld. Yeah. But if the original declaration was silent as to rentals, and now all of a sudden an amendment pops into play, and it not only regulates rentals, but it says, hey, you have to rent for at least a year or completely outlaws short-term rentals, I think we're going to see a lot of challenges going forward.
Wow, that's interesting because that's something that's been a pretty hot topic, even with a lot of clients of mine. Is like because the short-term rental space is profitable, it's desired. A lot of people want to rent short-term rentals, so there's a strong demand there in that market space. But the conversations I have with a lot of clients is where the HOA is going with this moving forward. So that's interesting. So do you now, if an HOA was able to get a unanimous vote on it, would that be different?
That would be different. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, at that point, they can do whatever they want.
Okay.
I mean, unless it's like something illegal or against public policy, but barring that, they would be able to affect an amendment.
And then what about, do you have an idea of like the average HOA covenants? Do they address rentals, or is that pretty rare for an HOA covenant to address that?
Most do. There in the 1980s, there were a lot of different covenants drafted that have similar language as it relates to rentals, and we see a lot of these in our practice. But it'll say things like you can rent property from time to time, or you must use it as a single family residence. And courts have found that that's not strong enough language to amount to a prohibition of short-term rentals. But it remains to be seen how a court would conclude, given this recent Arizona Supreme Court case, whether an amendment affected prohibiting short-term rentals would be valid in light of that original language.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. But I think this recent Arizona Supreme Court case is going to lead to some significant challenges in the next couple of years.
That's really interesting. So, and then let's say someone is considering buying a property in a neighborhood with an HOA. Their intent is to use it as a short-term rental. Is that a situation where they could hire a firm like yours to review the covenants of the HOA and the CCRs and everything and say, yeah, we think that this could be susceptible to an amendment, or we think it's less likely that an amendment could get passed? Is that like the type of work you guys would do? I'm just thinking of how could someone figure out if they're looking for a property to use as a short-term rental, if they've got a safer avenue in one neighborhood versus another.
Sure. I mean, I think that's absolutely correct. They could seek a consult with us or another law firm, and we'd be happy to review the CC&Rs. I think ultimately the recent Arizona Supreme Court case is going to provide further support for real estate investors, and in cases of close calls, they might decide to move forward now with purchases. But no doubt it's a great idea to look at the CC&Rs, and if you're unsure, get an expert opinion.
Okay, that's cool. And then how about back to that homestead law you were mentioning first? Who's the average person who would run into that kind of situation where they've got a judgment creditor coming after them? Like, is that something that you would see with the average person, or is it more like business owners, that type of scenario? What's a common scenario for that?
I don't really think there's any archetypical example there. I think it really is just anybody that was involved in a lawsuit that got a judgment against them. So it can be somebody who didn't pay the credit card debt, and ultimately a judgment was entered into a court judgment was entered into them. It could be somebody who breached a contract. It's really any civil court judgment.
Okay.
And under Arizona law, once that's recorded, let's say in Maricopa County, if you own real property in Maricopa County, the recorder's office picks up on that, and title officers will pick up on that now as a lien against that homestead property.
Okay.
Based on the new law.
And then what about the most common judgments we see, or liens that we see that need to get paid through closing, are tax liens, IRS tax liens? Is that's separate from what we're talking about here, or is there an exemption to how much the IRS can come after with a tax lien?
That's that's separate. That'd be a separate discussion. And there's interesting rules on that, and Arizona tax liens take priority, as you know, and so there's that's a separate area of the law.
Okay. And then, so one other question with these judgments, in those situations, are people negotiating with the creditor on like a payoff amount sometimes, like settling an amount, or is it typically like, because I know with IRS taxing, it's like if you owe $55,375, you have to pay $55,375. But with other creditors in a civil suit case or whatever, are they able to negotiate those down typically?
Well, I know a great tax lawyer that might disagree with that last statement. But yeah, no doubt, you're absolutely correct. Most of these cases are or at least a good portion of them are negotiated.
Yeah.
Negotiated down. So
Okay. Well, that's actually good to do with the tax liens too. That people should be getting in contact with an attorney if they want to try and get that negotiated down. A tax attorney.
yeah, there are tax attorneys that specialize in that area.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the most common one we see. And that usually is a nightmare once that pops up. It's like, oh boy, this deal's blowing up. This is going to take weeks to work this through. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's really great information, Ben. What are the most common cases that you guys tend to work on? Or is there one? I mean, it sounds like there's so many different things that you guys handle, but
There are. I mean, I would say over the years, we see a lot of easement cases. And a lot of these hinge on access issues. So it can range in terms of posture, but someone might be buying property and they're like, hey, I don't have any recorded access. I'm trying to work this out with the seller. Can you tell me what my legal rights are? And then there's also the more serious cases where somebody bought property with either a misunderstanding about access or an expectation it would be granted, and then that expectation fell through. So they need us to go into court and procure an easement. Courts don't like leaving properties landlocked. We see a lot of misrepresentation cases, both in commercial and residential real estate. In the residential space, it's interesting, but the current dynamic is so one-sided and in favor of the seller that you're starting to now see a lot of buyers that are waiving the inspection to win over the deal.
yeah.
And I wrote an article on this, but I don't think that's a good idea for the seller, because when you get into these misrepresentation cases, the seller will defend and say, hey, look, you were afforded an inspection and you obtained an inspection report. You inspected the property for 8 hours. You were aware of these issues and you had a full opportunity to inspect them. But if you're coercing the buyer to waive the inspection process and there's later a misrepresentation claim, the seller doesn't really have that argument to rely on.
Interesting.
And now the buyer has a stronger argument. So we're seeing a lot of misrepresentation cases, and that's both in the commercial space as well as residential. In the commercial space, one of the big misconceptions is if you have an as-is clause, the seller can do whatever they want and they're insulated from liability. But there's established Arizona case law precedent that weighs against that notion. And so even though there may be an as-is clause where the buyer's taken the property as is, seller still can't commit fraud and has to disclose material information that the seller knows about. And so so we see a lot of that. There's a lot of real estate activity, so a lot of people are asking us to draft purchase contracts and sale contracts, leases, review of the same. So it varies.
Okay. Actually, I haven't even thought about that. You guys could draft contracts. Every now and then I get it for sale by owner type of transaction and they need help with the contract. So I'd never even thought about sending them your guys' way for that.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
We like doing that. It's fun.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily fighting with the other side, so it's a change up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Nobody's pissed off yet.
Not yet.
That's really interesting about the inspection piece, because we see that commonly, and then appraisal contingency waivers as well. People forfeiting earnest money to get an accepted offer, and then they have no recourse if an appraisal comes in low. Yeah, just this last week we got two appraisals on the same day. They both came in 57,000 low, and both of them. No, 1 out of 2 would waive the appraisal contingency. So that one, the buyer's got to put some more money down, but he wasn't at max financing yet. So we're able to finance a higher percentage, and it came out to 10 grand additional instead of 57,000. But then the other one, the buyer's probably going to have to walk away from it. But he could get his earnest money back because he didn't sign that waiver of that contingency.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's good to know, and that's something sellers should think about because it's like a feeding frenzy right now, where the sellers are trying to squeeze every dollar they can. But it's not always about getting the most money; it's about getting the transaction that will close and will keep you out of a courtroom as well. Not as good business for you, but that's better for the seller. Yeah,
Perfectly fine with us.
Yeah.
As much as we love court, we love keeping clients out of court.
absolutely, absolutely. What do you think the average real estate owner should look out for when it comes to liability in real estate? We just touched on one of them, as a seller in this market. But what else do you think the average person who owns real estate should be aware of that are common pitfalls that people find themselves in?
Like a landlord. I mean, if you're talking about a residential landlord, you're going to want to have solid insurance. Of course, the situation nobody wants to think about is a tenant drowning in a pool or some kind of wrongful death situation where the owner may get obviously named as a defendant there. So you're going to have good insurance. Also, if you own a rental property, we always advise clients to own it in a single asset LLC. And so that way there's some limited liability protection as long as the formalities of the LLC are obeyed. Courts generally uphold that as a limited liability device. And then, of course, having just a good lease that has good rules and regulations, and of course the landlord's entitled to choose the tenant within the confines of the law, which tenant the landlord wants to lease the property. So you want to make sure it's somebody that you think is going to be a good tenant. Of course, you have to comply with the Fair Housing Act and can't discriminate. But barring that, there's that discretion that should be exercised, and then of course just inspecting the property and staying on top of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good information. Are there any, like, with what with real estate law, do you see any niches for people who are wanting to invest in real estate, like something that's kind of outside of the box of a space to be in, where there can be some money to be made, some returns to be had?
It's interesting. Patrick, my law partner, and I, we were in an interview the other day, and we were talking about this arbitrage strategy that we're seeing in the short-term rental space. And so that's where you'll have just a tenant, ordinary tenant, and may lease property for a year from the landlord, and then it converts the property into short-term rental space. And sometimes this is, of course, done with the knowledge and consent of the landlord. And the landlord doesn't care as long as there's no liability to the landlord. So obviously a lot of contract drafting there between the relevant parties, but you could have a situation where a tenant might lease space for $2,000 a month and turn it around and convert it to short-term rental space and earn $10,000 a month. And so it's like this arbitrage strategy. So we're seeing that, some of that, and then of course this new Arizona Supreme Court opinion is going to influence that a little bit, because I think we're going to see more short-term rental investors in light of the opinion, and I think it could potentially be harder for some HOAs to amend their CC&Rs going forward. And then, of course, you have the state law that makes it very difficult, or ties the hands of cities and towns from prohibiting short-term rentals. So living in an HOA is really the only chance of neighbors to kind of get together and amend the CC&Rs to prohibit short-term rentals. So I think that's one strategy we'll see.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know about the arbitrage with the short-term rental. So, is that something that has to be negotiated between tenant and landlord, or like does a standard renter's rights allow them to do something like that?
I mean, in most cases, it'd be negotiated. A lot of leases have what are called anti-alienation clauses, where it'll say, "Hey, listen, tenant, you cannot sublease the property unless you get my consent as the landlord." And then some leases will say, which shall not be unreasonably withheld, or it might say in the sole discretion of the landlord. And so there may be a clause there that the tenant is going, like you just said, is going to want to negotiate, because that clause could prohibit that strategy from being implemented.
Okay. Yeah, what I'm thinking about is the average person, myself included, who are not attorneys. We look at all the verbiage on like all kinds of legal disclosures we see. I see a sea of letters. I'm like, that's too much to read. I can't do that. But it's interesting because there's so much that you don't know. Like, I had no idea about that. And so if you're like, I think I see sometimes people who want to work without a real estate agent to save a buck, but they're really exposing themselves to potential liability because they're getting outside of some of these financial instruments or like contractual instruments that protect them from all these situations that can come up that they're not even thinking about. I had no idea about that. So it's like having a professional like you're a real estate agent negotiating contracts, so important to protect yourself because you don't know what you don't know. And that's where you're exposed, right? Do you think a lot of times you see people get in trouble because they didn't understand the potential liability?
Yeah, it happens every day. And frankly, we get more work on the back end in that situation when something goes wrong, because now you're involved in a court case and you have to litigate. So we'd love to see clients, on the front end kind of get this figured out to avoid that later dispute that could be messier.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, you had mentioned insurance. It's kind of like having insurance. Like you're protecting yourself for the unexpected or the unknown. Yeah, that's awesome. So we're in a pretty interesting real estate market now. People are speculating all kinds of things on what's going to happen going forward. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how the whole thing plays out. But what are your thoughts with where the real estate market is at now, and given the state of the economy, where things are going, in the next couple of years? What do you guys see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, of course. There's such a shortage of inventory still, and just reading a lot and speaking with other experts around the valley, I think it would take quite a bit to see a significant downturn in real estate prices. I think there's an inflation problem that, obviously you talk about it, but the Fed's going to have to deal with that. That's going to slow demand, in my view. Maybe it already has. And so we'll probably see a leveling off, maybe even a mild correction. I don't see anything significant. I don't see an issue with margin like we had in 2008. Where you're going to see this systemic failure or this widespread, catastrophic reduction in prices and wave of foreclosures. So I don't really see that, but there could be a leveling off and maybe a mild correction.
Yeah,
if anything.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of feel the same way. And because that 2008 crash, that was really a mortgage crisis. We screwed up the economy. We got a little excited and a little greedy and
but it got you a membership at Superstition Mountain.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all kinds of bad loans that were given out, and it was craziness back then. No money down and no income or asset verification, negative amortization, just the gamut of like no-nos with lending. And we haven't seen any of that for the last 13, 14 years. But basically all of that's against the law now. And it has been since 2010, when Dodd-Frank was written into law. So that's the thing I think people need to understand is the health of the real estate market in terms of financing is very strong. Loans are performing at the highest levels they have in decades, and people have to put money down, their skin in the game. Anybody who's self-employed, who's gone through a regular mortgage, knows the pain of that process. It's just a ton of paperwork you have to provide and a lot that has to be verified. So, I think from that perspective, we're in a safer space, but we could still see a recession outside of real estate.
There's also so much money in circulation. You have so many cash buyers, and of course, cash buyers are not influenced by interest rates per se. And so I think there's that tailwind as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cash buyers are not influenced by interest rates. So at least as it relates to financing, if rates are higher overall, there's some higher margins you could get outside of real estate with some, other vehicles. But yeah, that wouldn't affect them directly on real estate itself. Unless they're financing, maybe on the back end. Some of the, we see a lot of really large hedge funds purchasing in Arizona. Do you guys run into that in your practice? There's a lot of hedge fund activity here and has been for 6, 7, 8 years, buying up properties left and right.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's happening more and more. Even now with the rise in interest rates, that's, a prevailing trend as well.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that goes going forward. Um, so one final question for you here, Ben. This has been absolutely amazing, dude. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. This is
Hey,
really good.
I've enjoyed coming on the Jeff Rogan show.
Yeah. I'm not going to let you out yet. I got one more question for you. So I am like big on systems and process. I'm kind of like a routine oriented person. And so what's like one of your daily routines or systems that you use? It could be work, it could be personal, that you feel like has worked really well for you and helped you in your life in the day to day.
Yeah, I think one system our firm has successfully implemented that's been instrumental for us is we have a phenomenal intake department. So, we get a lot of calls every day and each week and month, and it would be very, very chaotic if we didn't have processes and systems in place. And our intake department is very well trained. We have very well documented systems that are followed. We perform conflict checks. There's intake calls made ahead of time. There's summaries that the client sends to us about their matter, so the attorneys can see what the matter's about. And so it's really a great organizational tool for us that kind of creates clear skies where otherwise there would be a storm. So it's really instrumental for us.
Dude, okay, that's amazing. Okay, we're gonna have to unpack this a little bit. That's
Okay.
really good. Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree. And same thing in my business. My team isn't as big as your guys' group, so we don't have the volume of calls that are coming in. But that's something I've just kind of struggled with on my team over the years, is figuring out like, how do I do that intake process? And who should be fielding those calls? And I've gone through different times where I'm like, okay, we need to make sure that who's ever calling in is getting all of their questions answered. Because if I have a team member talk to clients on the first call in, they're going to be asking questions. If those questions don't get addressed, then they're leaving that call feeling like, questions are lingering and they're unfulfilled, and they're probably calling another lender to get those questions answered. So I've gone through seasons where I'm like, okay, I'm going to start taking these calls because I know all the answers. Well, then I don't have time to take all those calls. So now I'm spending my entire day taking those calls, and I'm not prospecting for a new business. So we've gotten to a point now where Sarah Spinelli, my production manager, who's unbelievably well versed with underwriting guidelines, she knows more than I do at this point. She's doing all of our lead intake calls. So any question that a client has got is getting addressed right up front. So, and I've gone through that process with your office, and that was a good process, and I was able to get through to somebody right away. So do you have with your intake department, are they like attorney level employees or like paralegals, or what's the training process for them? What's their knowledge level?
Yeah, I mean they're not attorneys, but they're very well trained.
Yeah.
They know they know when to confer with the attorneys if there's a question. They know how to get the preliminary information in a way that's very organized, store it to the file,
Yeah.
and get everything set up for the attorneys based on our schedules. So
Yeah.
so very well trained and very well documented systems that kind of help us keep things organized.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that first touch with a client or a potential client, because that's a lot of times what it is. It's a potential client. And so if that first touch isn't good, then you might lose them right off the bat before you or Patrick even get a chance to talk to them. I remember when I had my call with Patrick, you and I hadn't met yet. Otherwise, you would have been my attorney. But I was sitting in the parking lot at the clubhouse at Torion. And this was over a dispute for a property in Torion that I wanted to get. But when Patrick called me for my initial consultation with him, he had the whole background. He had, paperwork that I had sent in. He had reviewed it. He was able to jump right in and, do some conversational upfront to, get to know me a little bit. And then he just can dive right into the scenario, and he knew all the back end of it. So to be able to get on that call with him and not waste time and get answers right off the bat was huge.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't challenge you to a golf match
Yeah.
before that call took place.
There's unfinished business there. We've talked about this. So hopefully Patrick listens to this podcast. And Patrick, I'm calling you out, man. You got to get out to Superstition for a money game.
He's listening.
Okay, good. All right, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time, dude. You've become one of my favorite people getting to know you, and your knowledge is unbelievable. You're one of the smartest people I know, and it's awesome to call you a friend and a neighbor and golf partner. And appreciate you taking the time.
Likewise.
All right, brother.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.